Let's return to page 36, the quotations. Marx and Engels, the big difference between Marx and Durkheim is Durkheim only talk about the division of labor, but Marx, he pointed the division of labor into classes. You are not just alone, you are not individual. When you got born, you belong to some specific classes. Class really matters. Class is really important. Marx and Engels speak constantly of the definite relations involved in all processes of production. Thus, quote, in production, men not only act on nature, but also on one another. They produce only by cooperating in a certain way and mutually exchanging their activities. In order to produce, they enter into definite connections and relations with one another. And only within these social connections and relations does their action on nature, thus production, take place. When you work on the nature, you work with other human beings. And again, quote, we make our history ourselves, but under very definite assumptions and conditions. Or, quote, the fact is, therefore, that definite individuals who are productively active in a definite way enter into definite social and political relations. When you produce something, you enter into some social and political relations. Unquote. The relations entailed by the division of labor are seen as definite in three ways. They constitute a specific mode of production. Mode of production. That's one of the key concepts, mode of production. Feudal society, capitalist society, socialist societies, specific mode of production. Each mode of production is also a specific mode of power. And in turn, each mode of power is a defining context for action, a definite way in which the past imposes itself on the present. The division of labor, the necessary means of satisfying human needs and creating human society, separates individuals from one another, and it produces a conflict between private and common interest. The specific form of this separation and conflict, this mode of production, is at any historical moment a question of power, of the ways in which the division of labor is made to work, to the advantage of some and the disadvantage of others. That is, the simplest form of division of labor, it is suggested, is that embedded in the relationships of the family and based on the power of men over women and of parents over children. And the power created through the division of labor at one moment of history is at the next moment presented to individuals as a system of independent and external constraints. The state, religion, law, custom, how things are in terms of which their own future action must be shaped. Thus, quote, in the social production which men carry on, they enter into definite relations that are indispensable and independent of their will. These relations of production correspond to a definite stage of development of their material powers of production. The sum total of these relations of production constitutes the economic structure of a society, the real foundation, on which rise legal and political superstructures. You had better remember these paragraphs too. This is the essence of the historical materialism of Marx and Engels. Let me repeat this. In the social production, which men carry on, they enter into definite relations that are indispensable and independent of their will. These relations of production correspond to a definite stage of development of their material powers of production. The sum total of these relations of production constitutes the economic structure of society, the real foundation on which rise legal and political superstructures. This is so-called the metaphor of base and superstructure. Base, 하부 구조 and 상부 구조. This is that paragraph. When you compare the Marx phrases with that of Durkheim, it seems to me, I'm somewhat partial in here. Durkheim's sociology is somewhat very neutral and somewhat unsophisticated. He did not pay enough attention to the relations of production and the power structure. He just not in that level. Here Marx has introduced several new ideas. They all, however, follow strictly from his understanding of the dynamic and divisive nature of the division of labor. The division of labor permits economic development because it represents an ever more efficient way of satisfying human needs, generating new needs and then satisfying them at the same time, insofar as the way in which labor is divided gives some people power in relation to others through their ability to appropriate a privileged share of what is produced and use it to their own advantage. A contradiction develops between the forces of production on the one hand and the relations of production on the other. Here, the key concept is contradiction. Contradiction between the forces of production, 생산력, the forces of production on the one hand, and the relations of production, 생산관계 on the other. Contradiction develops between the forces of production on the one hand and the relations of production on the other. Contradiction between forces of production and relations of production. Relationships brought into being the advance of the satisfaction of common needs become as a result of the appropriation of surplus produced by some an obstacle to the further satisfaction of those very needs. Ironically, it is the mere fact that the division of labor does generate a surplus over and above what is immediately needed for the subsistence of the producers that permits the development of this sort of contradiction. Labor begets property. The separation of individuals is turned into the inequality of individuals. The division of labor, Durkheim only noticed the separation, not inequality. The Marx, he identified inequality. It is not just separation of labor, separation of individuals, but the inequality of individuals. The most rudimentary form of this development is Marx and Engels suggests found within the family. So when you read Marx and Engels' book, you are very reluctant. You have very new approaches, new insight into your own family structure, family relations. Family. That quotation. The nucleus, the first form of property, lies in the family, where wife and children are the slaves of the husband. This latent slavery in the family, through still very crude, is the first property. You know, I learned the history. In the past, you know, if outsiders, the strangers, violate, raped your family members, your wife or daughter, which legal code did they violate? In the past, in the ancient times, in medieval times, your wife and your children belongs to you, just like your property, your own material property. So if someone hit or violate your family members, it's a violation of your own property, not violation of their own dignity. See? In the past, it's just not that far from here. A century ago, in our gay concert, in the past, a couple of years or months ago, the two people dispute, 두분 토론. There are the mayor. He's kind of a super patriotic kind of guy. He always talk about in the past, just a couple of generations ago, all the female could do is just this or just that. And that's not a joke at all. In Korea, just a decade ago, the female member of the family cannot have any property right to inherit the family fortunes. It's only less than a decade. We changed our legal code. So your mother got married to your father and did all the domestic jobs, and he took care of the children, took care of her husband, sacrificed herself, but in the end, nothing left. She had no right at all, property right. Now we change it. So Marx and Engels, it's very absurd. This latent slavery in the family, slavery. The wife and children are just slaves. The husband, in patriarchy, the family structure. This latent slavery in the family, though still very crude, is the first property. But even at this early stage, it corresponds perfectly to the definition of modern economists who call it the power of disposing of the labor power of theirs. Division of labor and private property are, moreover, identical expressions. Division of labor, Marx and Engels identify division of labor and private property. Private property. 사유재산. Moreover, identical expressions. That is, in the one the same thing is affirmed with reference to activity as it is affirmed in the other with reference to the produce of the activity. Increasingly, therefore, the division of labor is experienced by the individual not as a means of realizing common human interests in which he or she participates, but as a remote, external system standing over against the individual and which he or she is compelled to enter. Quote, though social power, the multiplied productive force, which arises through the cooperation of different individuals, as it is determined within the division of labor, appears to these individuals, since their cooperation is not voluntary, not as their own united power, but as an alien force existing outside them. Alien force. This is alienation. Alien force existing outside them, of the origin and the end of which they are ignorant, which they cannot control, which, on the contrary, passes through a peculiar series of phases and stages independent of their will and action of man. In this private property society, this class divides society. If you work together, it's not voluntary. If you don't have a job in public sector or private sector, if your parents is not, they are not wealthy enough, you have to join company. If you do not run your own company, you should join company. On the one hand, it's true, you have job. You got selected, you just passed that exam. On the other hand, it is enforced upon you. If you don't join that company, you cannot survive. It is forced upon you. It's not voluntary. Volunteering means, if you did not volunteer, nothing happens. But in capitalist society, this private ownership society, if you don't have enough property of your own, you cannot just sit down and just waste your time. Someday you don't have anything to feed yourself, to fill your own stomach. So it's enforced. Somehow, the most distinctive and fundamental of human creations, the relations of production, comes to appear as a power existing independently of human being. The purpose of historical sociology for Marx and Engels was to unmask the ways in which this apparent independence of economic history from human will had been historically brought about. In that unmasking exercise, the crucial element was they saw it in an understanding of the significance of class, an understanding that within any mode of production, the division of labor did not separate individuals randomly into isolated social atoms, but systematically into social classes. So you are at the same time as an individual, as a member of the class you belong. Question so far? How many of you think of yourself, you belong to the class? Let me ask you. Again, let me elaborate my questions. Before you listen to my lecture and read this textbook, how many of you think of yourself, you belong to the class, not just an individual? Before you take this class, this lecture, how many of you think of yourself, I belong to some specific classes? One, just one, two. Do you have any occasions come to realize that you belong to some class?
To me personally, class doesn't just count as an economic aspect, but it's a specific group that I belong to. So when I entered this university, Korea University, and then as I get older and meet a lot of people who actually graduated from this school and friends from this school, then I feel that I belong to this group, and then this group has a quite significant meaning in the society. So that's when I felt that I am the part of the class.
Yeah, thank you. This is really very important point. You are not just an individual. You belong to classes. Even though you recognize it or not, you like it or not, you belong to the classes. Nanjing student, do you have any class consciousness, class belongingness, or something like that? Do you have any chances to identify yourself? You belong to some classes? If you have that experiences, please raise your hand. If you're not, don't. Do you have any chances to recognize you belong to specific classes? Just one? Yeah, please fix the technical problems. Today there's so many problems. Yeah, I want to listen to you next week. When is the occasion you realized you belong to some specific classes? I have a very interesting cases. Once I joined the concert, usually I'm kind of I did not listen to the music because for me listening to music is very stupid. It's just kind of wasting my time. But as I am getting older, and I come to realize that the music is not just a waste of my time. It really enriches my soul. And now I try to listen to the music. It just deviates my attention. But anyway, I happened to join the one concert, and in the the intermittence, there are some intermittence between the intermissions. So we are on the hall and we try to have some coffee and some drink. And there I met a friend of mine who is from very rich family background, and he really is very devoted kind of, he really likes music. And that the cost is somewhat expensive. And when I encountered him, I felt he got really surprised. He thought, I did not listen to the music, especially the classic. So when we meet in the hall of that, I think that's the Sejong Hall in Gwanghwamun. And so that's very delicate moment. Usually the class struggle, the class conflict does not occur between have class, the bourgeois and proletariat. It's among the have classes, cultural capital and economic capital. That's usually the case. What I want to say is, when you recognize your class belongingness, it's not the time. Most of the time, you could not estimate your own fortunes, your own property. Most of the people did not know how much money do they they carry, or the wealth, the total amount of wealth with their parents. So most of the cases you cannot compare your fortune, not just your own fortune, but your family fortunes all included. So there is no ways you can compete with other family fortunes of other families. See? So the only occasion you can encounter the heavy classes is in that occasion you join the concert, or you just look around the exhibitions. statues or some paintings or something like that. I like watching that, looking around the museums and paintings. I don't have enough money, so all I can buy is just printing, not just the paintings. In the printings, they can print tens and hundreds, but still expensive. So the only occasion you can encounter the class struggle, class conflict is in that place. When you listen to the music or you are watching over the paintings, you encounter. That means, you encounter some people who have lots of money but don't have any eyes or ears, can identify some good, brilliant paintings or brilliant music. So when you encounter that kind of guys in concert hall, you think of that guy, oh, that pig. How could he listen to that music? Could he understand the meaning of that music? Is he just sleeping over? How could he pay that amount of money? Maybe someone just, give that ticket to him as a bribery or something like that. And that wealthy friend think of me or the poor, professors or teachers. That guy cannot afford to pay that ticket. How could he come to this hall, this concert? So the people who have lots of economic capital and the people who don't have many economic capital but have some cultural capital, usually between them there is some conflict. The real conflict in real world occurs. In most of the time, the proletariat, the working class, did not know how the people, they are eating and enjoying the music or enjoying some leisure times, playing golf and playing tennis or some swimming or just going abroad. They did not know. There is no way they encounter that rich people. So in the real world, my point is you have only a few occasions you can identify yourself. You belong to some classes, and there is some class conflict among your own classes, your own groups, and other groups. Into social classes. Social classes. Marx and Engels were at one with Durkheim in seeing the division of labor as the means by which human beings acquire individuality. It is through the division of labor that humanity progresses from the sheep-like existence of the tribe to the enormously varied individuality of the modern world. But for Marx and Engels, the division of labor is even more forcefully the source of inequality. The appropriation of surplus gives the appropriators an interest in common and against other members of their society. They emerge as a class in open or latent conflict with other classes. The division of labor separates individual interest from the common interest, but it also regroups interests among the lines of class. And in doing so, it gives the powerful classes the means of consolidating their power. The surplus they have appropriated can be used to create legal, political, religious, and cultural institutions in which class domination is legitimated and enforced. Nowadays in Korea, many people talk about the conflict between 1% rich people and 99% poor people. But when you have chances to talk about what is your viewpoint of our own society, is it 1 against 99%? I think most of the Korea university students don't buy that idea. It's at least 30 to 70 or 20 to 80 or something like that, not 1 to 1990. And in doing so, you assume you yourself belong to that 20% or 30%, not the lower 99 or 80 or 70%. So in the real world, only a few people can have that class consciousness. It's that difficult. When you read the Marx's masterpiece, The Capital, Das Kapital, you come to understand why it's so difficult to come to understand the structure, social structure of this capitalist society and the real class interest of your own. Yeah. In place of the old common interest, which class has shattered a new illusory common interest, that quotation mark means illusory common interest means it's not real. Let me ask you, what is national interest? Anyone can give definitions? What is national interest? In the past, that's so obvious. There are enemy outside. They try to invade us if we are not prepared, we are not coming together. We need national leader, a national, the state power, strong state power, leadership. But nowadays, we have relationships with many other countries. Many of you, more than 10 million people go outside, try to look around as a tourist or try to seek jobs outside our peninsula. There are some occasions in Iraq. One Korean worker, he tried to earn money. In Korea, he cannot find any job, so he was dispatched, he was sent to Iraq to earn money. What happened to him, Kim Son-il? He got captured and got beheaded by the Iraqi local people. So if you think, Korean government should defend the national interest of Korea, and they should defend the life and property of Korean people. Why the Korean people, the Korean public opinion, urged the Korean government to dispatch troops to defend our workers who are working all around the globe? Why don't it? You guys know that story. Our ship got kidnapped by the Sudanese pirates, and we send our ships and rescue them, right? In that case, we try to not only just defend our own soil, our territory, but our ships. That's our national interest. What I'm saying is, before you try to defend our national interest, we should define our national interest. National interest is not fixed. It's not given to us. It's not bequeathed to us from the past. In the substantial histories, I will tell you why the Japanese dispatched their troops to Korean soil. When they first come to Korea, it's only they try to defend their own merchants. The first time. But when there was some conflict among the merchant and Korean people, they try to defend their own commerce, but they try to expand their spheres of influence. That's the way the imperialists are dominating the colonies. They colonized it. So what I'm saying is, our social relationship, our interest is not fixed. It's always constituted. If we don't have that kind of big ship just sailing all around the globe, why we should dispatch our own ships to rescue our fishermen and our own commercial loot? So we should think of it. It's illusory common interest. By the way, when we endorsed the FTA with the USA, the Korean government tried to convince Korean people it's the national interest of Korea to have FTA with the US. But you guys hear that kind of stories. That's for sure. When we have FTA with USA, some industrial sectors, like our automobile industries, it's very good for them. We have some benefit by having FTA with the US. But in the field of agriculture, what happened to our farmers? It's a disaster. They cannot compete with the American farmers. When you have chances to go to the US, they did not even embed their own seeds. They just have their own plants to just cast their seeds all around the soil. We cannot compete. They are so industrialized. Their agriculture is industrialized and highly scientifically, technologically advanced. We cannot compete. So it's a disaster for Korean farmers. How about Korean universities? If the US universities, they try to make branches in Korea, I think your sons, 10 years to come, say, I don't think many of the Korean high school students, they try to join so-called sky universities in Korea. If the US expand their branches, high-ranking universities in Korea and Asia, for the Korean youth, I think is the better option. So I don't think FTA is good for the universities and for the professors. I'm not sure for the university students it's good or bad. So when someone talk about national interest, you should estimate the plus and minus of that treaty, that agreement. You cannot just argue that it's for our people in general, or it's for our national interest. You should ask them. Should ask the president and the bureaucrats and the intellectuals who side with that FTA. Ask them to show you the net result, the estimation of that, the effect of FTA. So if you think you belong to that losing side, you have all the reasons to protest against that FTA. If you think you will have a job in automobile industry or Samsung Electronics, yes, definitely you side with the FTA. So, siding with FTA is patriotic, and just criticizing FTA is unpatriotic. You cannot say that. And if you side with FTA, just think about, it's for the benefit of your family and your own future or not. You should think over. Think over and over. So, illusory common interest, which is really an account of the world legitimizing class domination, is brought into being. The distinctive and principal form of this illusory common interest was, for Marx and Engels, the state. State. Class power and political power are two sides of the same historical coin. Class power and state power. Let me fastly just read this. Through the division of labor, individuals take up definite roles in relation to one another and to the means of production. Men and women, master and slave, merchant and peasant, related to one another, not only through the economic nexus of production, but also through the social nexus of ownership and non-ownership. The various stages of development of the division of labor are just so many different forms of ownership. That is, the existing stage in the division of labor determines also the relations of individuals to one another with reference to the material instrument and product of labor. Yet, although the world of the division of labor appears to be a field of external power from the point of view of each new individual who enters it, there is in fact nothing rigidly deterministic about the process of class formation, as Marx and Engels understand it. Here, the two-sidedness of their sense of history is very apparent. Classes are made by people in certain circumstances. The definite, externally given nature of the circumstances does not at all diminish the importance of purposeful human action. The forms of the division of labor and of ownership and inequality do not march blindly through history with the momentum of their own. Specific modes of production and specific forms of inequality are actively made or not made by specific historical actors in specific historical settings. Consider the example offered by Marx and Engels in the German ideology. Let me read through this and let me finish. This is very interesting and very unique. In the Middle Ages, the citizens in each town were compelled to unite against the landed nobility to save their skins. The extension of trade, the establishment of communications, led the separate towns to get to know one other towns, which had asserted the same interest in the struggle with the same antagonist. Out of the many local corporations of burghers, there arose only gradually the Bürger class. Bürger means Bürger or bourgeois. Bourgeois means the city dweller, citizen. City dweller, citizen. Town, they are living in town. The conditions of life of the individual Bürgers became, on account of their contradiction to the existing relationship and of the mode of labor determined by these, conditions which were common to them all and independent of each individual. The Virgas had created the condition insofar as they had torn themselves free from feudal ties, and they were created by them insofar as they were determined by their antagonism to the feudal system, which they found in existence. When the individual towns began to enter into associations, these common conditions developed into class conditions, the same condition, the same contradiction, the same interest, which even implicitly does justice to the fact that history, whatever its general patterns and outcomes, is from day to day made by individuals. So when you have chances to read Durkheim's book, The Division of Labor and the Suicide, the elementary forms of religious life, you see there's no specific name of the individual or individual actor. He's just talking about structural differentiation, division of labor, and changing patterns and norm. The division of labor does not just develop or evolve in some sort of automatic or reflex response to the struggle for existence. It is always socially constructed. Socially constructed. It's one of the main key concepts. Socially constructed, taking one form rather than another, because some particular people have acted in one way rather than another, have within the given terms of the struggle for existence chosen to pursue the struggle by, say, specializing as merchants or masons rather than continuing as peasant, jack of all trades. It is not just the abstract logic of the division of labor that produces that result, however. It occurs within some historically constructed setting of opportunity and constraint. Opportunity and constraint. A setting in which many are obliged to be peasants or unskilled workers, while a few can choose to be masons or merchants. The difficulty is especially clear in Durkheim's discussion of the fourth division of labor. But the problem he faces there, that some people have the power in any actual historical situation to determine how labor is divided for others, while many more find that their labor must be divided in ways over which they have little or no control. It is surely not some sort of especially odd, or as Durkheim called it, abnormal case, but rather what normally happens in most societies most of the time. So, although Durkheim senses there's a division of labor, some people become the landlords and capitalists, and some people become peasants and workers, working class. He captures the historical process, but he did not raise any questions about that kind of historical process itself. But Marx and Weber, they raise huge questions against that process. What proportion of any given group of scribes in contemporary Britain have any real range of choice about the way in which their labor will be divided? Here he actually assumes he's talking about Paul Willis' book, The Learning to Labor. I don't know, what do you think about the educational system? Usually, it's not only the developing countries, but the advanced capitalist societies. What do you think is the role of educational system, including elementary, middle, and high school, and even college? What is the role, the function of educational system in Korean society and in Chinese society? What is the role, the function of education? Anyone? Any Chinese student? What is the function of educational system in your society? In two sides, as a social system, the educational system produces the new members. They teach them the norms, the skills, And on the other side, from the individual's point of view, in order to become a member of one society, you guys have to learn something. How to speak, how to act, how to behave in some special occasions. If you don't have any ideas what to do in any given moment, you are just at a loss. You are in some sense in anomic situation. You just don't know how to behave. But most of the students from underclass, lower class, working class, they knew very well the hidden script of the schooling, the school system. Most of the cases, it is the student from high class or middle, upper middle class based student. They do well in their school achievement. The student from lower class, saying from peasants or the working class, actually they did not have any foundation how to learn in their school days. So when there are some exams or some tests in school, they most of them, in most of the cases, they fail to get the grade. And when they have any low grade in many tests, they come to realize that the school system is not for them, not to educate, not to give them some dignity or some skills. They try to just normalize from the students some lower class background. They think this is the normal distribution. They are very well. This is just 0.0. They think, usually the student from lower class, they belong to this. Upper class, they belong to this. Even though they devote the same amount of time and energy in preparing for the test, the exam, usually they fall behind. Their grade is very poor. When this kind of things just happen again and again, they come to realize that it is against their own class interest, class instinct. So they just lost any enthusiasm, any interest in schooling, attending the class. So they just omit, they just miss the classes, and they gather together among the same class background, and they just try to do something outside the school. Even though their intention is they try to reject, they just refuse that kind of class-biased schooling. But the net result is they even lack that proper skills, not only in technological terms, but in their daily language usages. They are very poor, and they are very, when they say something, that's very brutal. They are not well sophisticated. Their even sociability is somewhat limited. So they cannot even finish their middle school or high school grade. When they were outside the school system, what could they do? They have to do very humble, very dirty and very difficult and physical, work. So although the student from a low class, working class background, they reject, they understand, they knew very well. The school system is not to educate them, but to classify, normalize, and it's some kind of a selection process. So they don't want to make four of them. And they knew the essence of the school system, and they just leave. They reject the system. But the net result is they don't have any knowledge or any skill that can make him earn money. So they became the lower class again, just like their parents' generation. So there are many reports, researches about that. The student from high or middle class basis, they have some good achievement in their school days, but the lower middle or lower classes, they are very poor in their achievement in the school system. What this author, Philip Abrams, is talking about is, although Durkheim, he paid attention to the division of labor, there was something wrong in the division of labor. That's not the natural process. He knew, but he did not think of it. It's the central problem. Line 5 from the up. In other words, the division of labor occurs historically within some context of structured inequality. Structured inequality. That means, the son of peasants could become the working class, not capitalist. The son from the landlord class, they could become the capitalist. There are some threshold. To become a capitalist, you have some money, enough to gather, have some invest and have some more money. You should have some seed money, to invest in the market, stock market, many other forms of market. If you are the son or daughter from wealthy family background, you can have the chances to have some first shot. But if your parents are very poor, how could you have some money to invest in something, to improve your own resume or to invest in some money market? So the division of labor occurs historically within some context of a structured inequality. The division of labor occurs not in nothing, structured inequality. It is this issue of the way in which historically constructed power creates a framework for the choices of actors in any particular present that lies at the heart of the type of social analysis pioneered by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. Here is no book. Engels' book. Engels, he also is one of the great social thinkers. He wrote the condition of English working class. If you have chances to read his book, it really depicts the misery of the people, the working class, in his time, in 18th century and 19th century. Capitalist society, from the beginning, is not that rational. It's based on the blood, tears, and sweat of the working class. It's not natural. So Karl Marx and Engels, they pay attention to that aspect. Unlike Durkheim, Marx and Engels constantly insist on the two-sidedness of history, on the way in which history is at one hand and the same time a product of both the chosen action of individuals and the forceful constraint of social structure. I have one simple question. If you don't work, what would happen to you? if you don't work? What would happen to you? What is going to happen to you if you don't work? Work, labor. So you lose any financial support. Who support you financially? You yourself or your parents? Yeah, in order to survive, we need some money. You should earn some money. In the American movie, Jerry Maguire. Who watched that movie? Jerry Maguire, starring Tom Cruise. Jerry Maguire. In that movie, that's very famous for the statement by Cuba Gooding Jr. Show me the money. Show me the money. Money. If you don't work, you cannot support yourself. Not even your own family members. Work. You know, everybody, I think most of us, not only in this class, but in China, after you graduate university, I think most of you, more than 90% you have to have your own job to support yourself, right? In that sense, everybody is going to become a worker. If your parents were rich enough, give you money and credit enough to cover your whole life. If you are not that lucky, I think you definitely have to have some job, right? But just think about that, your future job. If you want to become a lawyer or professor or just a fund manager, can you choose as you wish? If you want to become a teacher, elementary school or just kindergarten school, teacher, could you do that without any difficulties or any problems? One sense, you know, if you choose your job, it has two sides. It's for sure. You choose that job. You try to become a professor, not in sociology, but economics or government department. In the US, in Korea, most of us call the 정치학과 as political science department. But in the US, some universities call it government. In Harvard University, they call it government. That's political science department. You can choose. But on the other hand, it was forced to you. You have to choose among them. You cannot do, you know, everything.